Hello. I'm Johnny Worthen, and I'm an wrong meeting, sorry. I'm Johnny Worthen. I'm a published author. As Eric mentioned, I have several book deals. I'm working with 3 different publishers. Next, I have 2 novels out and a novelette out now. Next year, 3 completely different novels will hit the stands. Mystery, another young adult, and something that defies explanation. But tonight I want to talk to you about writing. First, how many people are here because they have to be here for a professor? Be honest. All right. Okay. You? No. All right, okay. I'm a multi-genre author, which is really difficult to be because I write all kinds of stuff. My first book is Beatricel, and that's what I'm going to read first. This is a horror, and if you don't know what a genre is, that's okay, because the only real definition of genre I've ever heard that makes any sense is it is the shelf the bookstore will put your book on. Nothing else matters. You know, a young adult, dystopia, it doesn't really matter. It's literary, it's literature, it's not. Characters change, they don't. Just what bookshelf where they find it. So when I wrote this, Beatricel, I considered it an occult thriller. It was picked up by a dark fiction publisher, Omnium Gathering in Los Angeles. Actually, it was my second publisher for this novel. The first one I slithered out of the deal because this one was better. So I had, my story was, I was at the Word Harvest Writing Festival in Santa Fe with Tony Hillerman's daughter, Ann Hillerman, who is a lovely human being, and if you're watching this, I love you very much. I will be seeing you in November. And I was having a hard time getting my books going because I've been querying nonstop for a year and a half, 2 years. I have great books. I have a backlog. I have 11 finished novels as we speak. Yeah, I know. So what I did is, I just finally decided I was going to self-publish. I was no longer, I had a great class, and they said, we're going to teach you to love ebooks, and they did. Suddenly I was no longer afraid of ebooks. I figured I'm going to bring Beatricel out as an ebook and self-publish it and get something on my resume, get myself an Amazon page. I went home, all determined to do that, opened up my email, and had 2 offers on the book. So I said, okay, I'll do it on Eleanor. Well, they picked up Eleanor, and they picked up The Finger Trap, and they picked up the other 2 in this, so I haven't looked back anyways. All right, Beatricel is an interesting book. This is a very adult book. It's an angry book. It is a love story. I'll read you that. Beatricel by Johnny Worthen. Isn't that just wonderful? It's about a demon. Unsatisfied with the ancient grimoires, the Magus made his own. Unsatisfied with the ancient demons, the Magus made Beatricel. She was a creature of love, but there is no love without hate, no light without darkness, no loyalty without betrayal. And demons covet flesh. I studied the occult my whole life. I'm one of those bad guys. At Comic-Con, they put me in a panel the last day of the con called Demonology 101. Sitting beside me was an ordained minister. It was just the 2 of us. I was literally the devil's advocate. I dragged a couple of friends up just for some cover, and we had a great freaky time on that one. But I know something about the occult, and when I wanted to write an occult thriller, I kind of knew what I was talking about. I wanted to bring magic and the occult, show it in popular fiction as the practitioners of the arts believe it works. Whether you believe it or not, angels, demons, magic, Wicca, Druidism, shamanism, feng shui, whatever, doesn't matter. My book encompasses it all. But I wanted to treat it with that kind of respect. So in a magical worldview, I'm doing great. In a magical worldview, the book begins in this way. By Johnny Worthen. I love that part. Oh, a couple other things. How many writers here today? Okay. Any of you read Dune? Yeah. Read Dune. One of the things that Herbert does in Dune is, since he has to create an entire background of his story, he does so with the use of epigraphs. At the beginning of each of the chapters, there'll be a little history that kind of explains how the universe got where it is. I used implemented the same idea that each chapter has an epigraph. I use these as a color for the chapter and as background. So the first chapter of the book begins very simply with a quote from Tennessee Williams. "If I kill off all my demons, my angels might die as well." The demon moves between the planes easily now, never wholly giving up its perch in Asiya, the material world. She finds Lady Sasha napping in front of a flickering television. She hates Lady Sasha. Lady Sasha is one of those who rent them apart. When Lady Sasha is gone, who then will be left? Who then could do the same? The demon possesses little will here, but it is a task she relishes. She bargained well. Should have done the deed for nothing. It brings her closer to her own goal. The room is filled with other demons and shades, older and wiser than she, cruel and hungry. They flitter around the priestess and cackle. They don't love Lady Sasha. They are subjects, indentured and tricked. They will not interfere. Yaum wants her docile, cooperative, and in the garage. That is all. How she does it isn't his concern. His lack of interest in her workings is disappointing. Has he no curiosity? She longs for flesh again. Nothing will ever be as sweet as what she had, but even the thick, fatty body of the voodoo priestess will be a gown of splendor. She hungers for it. Sasha resists the sharing. They battle in the priestess's mind, a short psychic struggle, then a terror, a break, a madness. Sasha does not share, so the demon takes. The sharing is not as it was. There is no love in it, no beauty, no grace. No sharing could ever compare to the sharing with him who made her. No sharing will ever come voluntarily again. This she knows, but still she exists for that hope. Love, sharing in the garden, was everything her kind could ever dream of. Sharing in the garden, that wonderful coalescence that mortals take for granted, was not meant for her kind. The perplexity, the potential, God's own crucible, was not for angels. She is unique among her kind, strong as few have ever been. She had a suit of flesh and gave it up. Not once, but 5 times, 4 willingly, for love's sake. And then the renting. Infused with purpose, hers and his, she slips into the priestess's dreams, and together they walk into the garage. They enter through a gap in the circle. They climb up a ladder which groans under the woman's weight and threatens to topple. The Magus steadies it below. When she is balanced on top, he carefully follows her up and ties the rope around her ankle, and casually he pushes her off. The support beam creaks but holds, dust showers the circle and flares in the candle flames. He climbs down and folds the ladder away into an impossibly small bundle, technological magic, metal and math. He takes the ladder back to his car and returns with a bucket. He closes the circle with a scratch of his chalk and begins his magic. Lady Sasha stirs as though she hears the barbaric name, senses it in the end. The bucket fills and spurts and gushes and drips. The demon soothes her with promises of light, ethereal splendor, and quiets her, so she dies quietly as directed. The demon lies to Lady Sasha. It is no kindness. The demon wants her destroyed as much as he does. The demon grips her until the bucket is full, and her miraculous body is a cold, vacant husk, hanging upside down and dead. That's Beatrice. Isn't she lovely? Don't want to party with her. So this is the story of a magus who creates his own lover. Knowing the magical ways, he studies the grimoires and summons and creates with his own will his vision of love. And he loves her, and she loves him. She loves her creator. He has so powerful as a magician that he has infused her with a will of her own, as you saw here. But this scene that we just saw happens after the break, after the renting. And this book actually begins when Julian Cormack, our magician, has just been released from the hospital, mental hospital. So as part of the chapter 2, I just want to read this. 2 things to know about this. This first little bit is the epigram, which goes further to explain the magical worldview, which you really need to have to follow the book. But it also does it breaks one of the cardinal rules of fiction. And this was marvelous that I got picked up with this. The hook chapter I just read was actually added later as a hook. The book actually begins here with the main character waking up, and you don't do that. You flat out don't do that. You don't start your book on the weather, and you don't start your book with the character waking up. My publisher is a bigwig at the Horror Writers Association of America in Los Angeles, and before she bought this book, she wrote to me and asked if she could read it to her chapter to show how once in a blue moon you could pull it off. Then she bought my book and had me change it. But just to place you here. This is the epigram, chapter 2. I don't like it. Magical theory. So in a way, if you read this book, it actually teaches you some of the metaphysical theory. Okay. In the potential of all things, there is all things. Recombination and reassembly is all that's needed for air to be water, and lead to be gold, and thought to be action. In the unmanifest, there are swirling potentials that need only 3 things to become real: thought, imagination, and will. These 3 intangible forces, when focused upon a goal and given a name, will stir the soup of creation and bring forth an entity from its potential to its being. Alive when given purpose, it will act and be at its master's will, provided the master is strong and the purpose suited. They are seen and unseen. They are known by many names, be they angels or demons, or spirits or gnomes. They carry the divine spark and have their place in the hierarchy of heaven, where man is not the lowest, but dwells closer to the source than most, refined. But man lies behind the veil, and they pass freely between. So each covets the other. This is from Frater F. Lubitsch, Grimoire CCX, that's 226 from 1887, from the Notes of Julian Cormack, Private Collection, translated from the German by Julian Cormack. Julian Cormack is, of course, our hero, but by access to his letters there. And then I break the rule and fix it. Julian stares at the wall in the late morning hangover of his medications. Yesterday's clothes lay in a heap in the doorway. The 60-watt bathroom bulb burns bright and true as a comforting beacon, illuminating another pile of discarded clothes in the hallway. Sunshine seeps through the cracks in the curtains, its beams shining like gold buttresses in the fog of floating dust. A column of light illuminates a half-dozen orange pill bottles on a side table. They stand like chess pieces beside an alarm clock. It's 10:15 in the morning, and something has to happen. Originally, he just woke up at that point. By changing, you get the idea. The reason it works so well is because this is actually a story about waking up into a consciousness. So the metaphor worked very well, but it was so off-putting, my publisher can be wake at the beginning and just look around. So that's an important issue. So as the horror continues in this, Julian has a psychiatrist. We learned that he had a mental and physical break whereupon he attacked his girlfriend Tracy, did her bodily grievous injury, and was dragged into a mental hospital in Portland, Oregon, where he stayed for many months until one day he escaped and came back fine. And his release is tethered to visiting a psychiatrist, Dr. Stevenson is his name. And Dr. Stevenson is not a great psychiatrist. He's used to working on the well and wealthy, the people who come to him because they're guilt-ridden or whatever, and not really having real problems. But he's done this as a friend to Julian's father, who's an old friend of him. But what's happened is Julian has challenged his worldview against the psychiatrists, and they have a debate. You see, do I look like I'm eating this? Can you hear me? Do I need this?
Yeah, keep that.
Okay. Make eye contact. So what led you to be interested in the occult, to begin looking into it? Julian isn't lying on the sofa the way he usually does. He sits cross-legged and relaxed, a notable change, thinks Stevenson, and makes a note of it in his folder. He's more open and easier to talk to since his last visit. He's shown progress coming off his medications. Bed knobs and broomsticks, says Julian. What? It's a Disney movie. I don't remember the plot, but at some point they're under attack and they muster a magical army of empty suits of armors and assorted malice. It was cool. So you saw magic in a movie and assumed it was real? Stevenson aches for this debate. He's fought against faith healers and cultists in a dozen published journals. It is his forte. It isn't his forte. He's best known for his clinical works with antidepressants and serotonin reuptake inhibitors. But before retiring to his current practice, he penned an occasional editorial warning his fellow psychiatrists to stay away from the muddled mess of faith-based medicines and New Age panaceas, which lingered on from the 60s. Living in liberal Oregon amid the Haight-Ashbury transplants and Nulo flower children of the Northwest, he'd come across holistic herbalists. His feelings for the fad hasn't changed since his college days, though his vocal derision of it has necessarily been dimmed by his environment, and he's careful to couch his criticism in medical urgencies. How old were you? Were you old enough to know that films aren't real, just make-believe? I was young, but I knew what the hell a movie was. Besides, it didn't matter, doesn't matter. When you tell a child that anything is possible, sometimes they believe you, and, he says after a pause, sometimes you're right. What do you call your religion? Wicca? I don't have a religion. Religion implies dogma, blind faith, and unchanging truths. So you're an anarchist. Isn't that a political label? Are you now trying to pigeonhole me into a political box as well? Difficult, he writes. In italics. I have an italics thing. I'm just trying to find some common terms, says the doctor, words and ideas we can both agree on. I told you, I know what you're trying to do. I've read your opinions in Psychology Quarterly. To be honest, not fair. I've already labeled you, pigeonholed you, and dismissed you. I guess it's only fair you do the same. Julian, I'm trying to help you. I need to understand to help you. Julian straightens his legs, then crosses them the other way. He looks at Dr. Stevenson, who lets the silence settle. Okay, what do you want to know? Why do you still believe in magic? For the same reason you believe in the elevator that brings you up to your secret office door, because it's real, because it works, because it's effective, because you know how to get to it, how to use it to get where you're going, and get what you need. Stevenson knows to be careful and not dismissive. He mustn't prove Julian right in thinking he doesn't have an open mind. Still, the debate is on. And how does Julian know about his back entrance? You're comparing magic, bed knobs, and broomsticks to an Otis elevator, fantasy to technology? Sure, why not? Do you understand how an elevator works? How the electronics function? How it measures to the millimeter where it stops on each floor? Why it won't drop like an anvil if the cable's cut? What's your point, Julian? Maybe you know some of it. Maybe you have some idea, some theory. Maybe you read some books about it even. Maybe you can make an educated guess. You're certain that by performing certain actions in certain ways, in certain order, you will set in motion a chain of events that will culminate in your desired goal, arriving in your plush, smug office. Magic is exactly the same. So riding an elevator is magic. Everything is magic. If you don't understand the technology, what's the difference? What we call technology today, our ancestors would call magic. What we call magic today, well, tomorrow we'll see. That's a pretty loose definition. You're interested in strange things happening without explanation, action at a distance. I'll go a step further. Please do, enlighten me. Julian smirks and then wipes all emotion from his face. Puts both feet on the ground, leans forward and stares at Stevenson. From across the room, his gaze drills into Stevenson and he feels it like heat. Stevenson stares back. Julian doesn't look threatening, doesn't look concerned, just intent. His eyes become the focus of his body the room. Stevenson holds his gaze as long as he can, then turns away without meaning to, unable to maintain the contact. You're trying to implant some kind of thought in my head? No, I was trying to dominate you with my gaze, and I did. That's just an animal thing, intimidation. That's not magic. I changed your mind. I made you look away. I dominated action at a distance. The staring contest was a cheap trick. But he feels uneasy. Stevenson retreats into a safe silence and waits for Julian to continue. Magic has been defined as changing the universe in conformity with will. That's the key word, will. What about magic words, wands? Either part of the ballet of pushing the elevator buttons or ways to concentrate the will upon its purpose, which in magic is essentially the same thing. He has an answer for everything. This isn't his first defense. He's faced these pressures before. What about spirits? The question makes Julian pause. Is that worry on his face? Confusion? Forces that move the universe, says Julian. The things that pull the elevator up and catch it when it falls. Or not. Think electricity. Stevenson is getting nowhere this way. Julian, these are just loose definitions and doublespeak, he says into his folder, still unable to look at his patient. Can you conjure? Some things, he says. Show me something, anything, Stevenson says. Okay, Herod, I need some water. Stevenson leans forward and speaks into his intercom. Susan, he says, not waiting for a response, would you bring us some waters? Julian settles back onto the couch, cross-legged again, regarding the room nonchalantly. In a moment, the door opens and Susan comes in with 2 bottles of chilled water and glasses of ice. She looks at Stevenson, who gestures to Julian. She puts the bottles on the table and leaves without speaking a word. Stevenson gazes across his desk at Julian, waiting for him to do some parlor trick with the water, perhaps pour it into a handkerchief or change it to blood. Julian doesn't move. He waits in silence for his patient to perform. And after a moment, Stevenson says, Well, what? Says Julian, a smirk tugging the side of his mouth. Show me your conjuration. I'm waiting. I just did. Did you miss it? I conjured water. A loud, frustrated sigh escapes the doctor. Sorry, Doc, that's how it works. The universe will always take the path of least resistance. I can only tell you that if I wanted the water badly enough, and you didn't help, or Susan didn't bring it, or the water mains were broken, and all the oceans were gone from the whole planet, it would still appear, somehow, if my will were strong enough. Nice escape clause, he says. Julian goes on. Things happen when you ask for them. The will desires and the hands oblige. A chain of other agents do the work when they do not. Motors and such in elevators, people when that's appropriate, and other times for other purposes, there are unseen forces. Julian's voice trails off. And that's me. So, we had one bit of gore, waking up from medicines, I love the medicines thing, and magical theory. Good stuff. Now for something completely different. Eleanor the Unseen. Eleanor, my girl. The story of Eleanor probably first came to me driving by Taos, New Mexico, thinking of Tony Hillerman's story, Skinwalker. I don't know if you have any Tony Hillerman fans in the room. I do. Just thinking about that and working through it, and then realizing the idea of the ultimate metaphor for the trials and tribulations, as I saw it, of growing up, could be encapsulated in old legends. And so I wrote Eleanor. Eleanor hides in plain sight as a sophomore in a small Wyoming high school in Jamesford, Wyoming. She can imitate animal sounds perfectly. Her senses are keener than anyone else's, she knows. And her instinct tells her it's safest just to blend in. Her mother, Tabitha, knows her secret. Tabitha knows the extent of her powers and their purpose. But Tabitha is dying of cancer, and Eleanor is terrified of facing a future alone. It's not until her friend David, the only friend she's ever had in the world, returns to Jamesford that Eleanor's talents begin to display themselves erratically and threaten to expose her as the inhuman thing she is. Chapter 1. The coyote circled the campsite in ever-tightening spirals. There were 3 people there, a man, a woman, and a child. The child was out of the box. The big ones, the adults, were still inside talking and clattering, making smells of bacon, milk, and pepper. The coyote discerned each distinct odor. distinct odor over the lingering sulfurous steam. The child was female, 7 summers at most. By size, she was at the upper end of what the coyote could bring down. It could kill the girl because the girl was a child. But that was dumb thinking. The big ones inside would not abandon the girl, even dead. It was not so hungry or foolish to actually attack the girl, not so hungry at all. A poacher had shot a moose from his car, and the animal had died not far from here. There was meat there for a week at least, enough to fatten up. The coyote had been a coyote for so long that it hardly remembered not being a coyote. It did not want to forget its family. It was losing its history, its identity. It wanted to be safe, needed to survive. But it was time to take a chance. The coyote watched the girl skip through the morning summer sunlight, chanting a song it had heard before but couldn't remember. It watched the girl wander out of the camp, collecting pine cones in her arms until they overflowed and she knelt to gather them. From the white camper drifted the smell of frying eggs. Camper! Yes, the thing was called a camper. The coyote remembered. The little girl grew still and peered into the trees. The coyote froze, letting its fur hide it in the undergrowth. It was tan, tawny, and copper-streaked. The blend made it nearly invisible against the forest background. "Hello?" said the little girl. Coyote remained motionless. It watched the girl with glassy, unblinking eyes and waited. She had auburn hair, not wholly unlike the coyote's coat. Clean skin, healthy size and weight. The child shrugged, giggled at something only she knew, and trotted after more pine cones. "Celeste," came a voice from the camper. "Don't go far, it's almost breakfast." "Kay," she called back. When her back was toward it, the coyote padded closer. The girl turned around. The coyote was out in the open, but froze nonetheless. "Doggy!" she cried. The coyote held still. The girl took a tentative step forward. Her attention diverted, the pine cones spilled out on the ground again. The clatter sent the coyote bolting for cover. "Doggy!" called the girl. "Doggy, come back!" She loped through the brush where the coyote had run, but it was already gone. It circled the campsite, head low, and watched the girl from a distance. "Celeste, come on back," said a woman in the camper. Shading her eyes with her hands, the girl searched for the coyote, turning all the way around. Finally, she shrugged her shoulders in an exaggerated gesture, a mimic of something she must have seen and hadn't yet perfected. Then she skipped back to the campsite. Once out of the trees and in the clearing by the picnic table, she caught sight of the coyote behind an iron barbecue stand. She squatted down and held out her hands as if offering it food. Unmoving, the coyote watched her. The girl shuffled forward in a squat, her hand outstretched. Taking in every movement, studying every feature, remembering how it was done, the coyote studied the little girl. It smelled the air, listened for danger, and then took a cautious step towards Celeste. The girl giggled, and instead of scaring the coyote, the sound cheered it. The coyote was out of cover, 10 feet from the camper. It knew it was in pistol range if a gun was at hand, and there was always a gun at hand. "Doggy, come here, I won't hurt you." It was not trust that moved the coyote closer to the girl. It did not even remember what that was. It was not hunger or fear, the only motivations that had moved it for over 40 years. No, it was something unique and unnatural that stirred in it. It was a yearning to take a chance at rejoining a world it had left nearly half a century before, a world that had taken everything from it. It was crazy madness, and that coyote felt every bit of that insanity as it defied its instincts and crept closer to the squatting girl. "Nice doggy," she cooed. "I'm just going to pet you. I'll be real careful." Tense as a spring. Its weight shifted for a sudden dash. The coyote stretched its neck and sniffed the girl's fingers. The girl shuffled closer. The coyote twitched with its animal instinct to run, wrestled with its ludicrous longing to stay. The girl touched the coyote's head and scratched between its ears. Though the coyote held her gaze in its cold, unblinking stare, she was not afraid. "You're nice," she said. You don't bark or anything." The coyote moved closer. Celeste laughed. The coyote lifted its muzzle up to the girl's face and sniffed. Celeste sniffed back. She rubbed her nose against the coyote's and giggled again. The coyote inhaled the girl's breath, tasting her lungs, her heat, her blood. Celeste threw her arms around the coyote and pulled it toward her in an ardent embrace. The sudden capture surprised the coyote and it yipped. "Oh, I'm sorry," Celeste said, letting it go. "Sometimes I hug too hard. I know, I'm sorry." "Celeste, dear, what was that?" called the woman. "Come in now, it's breakfast." Celeste looked over her shoulder at the camper and stood up. "I've got to go now," she said. "I'll bring you some bacon after brunch, okay?" She started to go. The coyote yipped again. She stopped. Celeste turned to face the coyote, her hands on her hips, in a severe gesture of mimicked impatience. The coyote sprung on her. It slammed her to the ground and pinned her beneath its spindly legs. Celeste shrieked. The coyote bent over her face, showed its teeth, and growled. The camper fell silent for an instant, then burst into noise, plates clattering, doors flung open. The coyote lowered its head over Celeste's face. The girl stared, terrified at the animal. For a long moment, they regarded each other. In the depths of each other's eyes, fear and wonder, despair and hope, mingling in the potential of that moment. Then the coyote opened its mouth and shot out its tongue. It licked Celeste from her chin to her forehead in a rough, dry kiss. Celeste squealed in delight and surprise. "Celeste!" said a man in a panicked voice. "Don't move, honey!" The man had a gun. The coyote heard it, smelled it, saw it. He sidestepped out of the camper and circled the pair on the ground. He was looking for a clear shot. Celeste squirmed out from under the animal. The woman cried. The man raised the gun. "No, Daddy!" cried Celeste. "It'll bite you, sweetie." "No, it's nice." Celeste ran to the coyote and threw her arms around its neck. "See?" she said. The man half lowered his gun. The coyote tensed and kept his eyes on the man and the shining steel in his hand. Celeste stroked the animal's fur. The coyote watched the man. The man pursed his lips and glanced at his wife. That was all it could hope for. The coyote bolted. It ran low and fast into the picnic table, across the campsite, and disappeared into the forest. Sprinting for its life, it listened for the gun, expecting to feel the burning bullet in its haunches. But it did not come. The man did not shoot. 2 hours and 2 circuitous miles later, the coyote approached the dead moose. It could still taste the little girl in its mouth, smell her breath, remember her hair, her laugh, and her eyes. It rushed at the vultures, snapped at them, and snarled until they all fled. Then it ravenously set upon the moose meat. It needed to put on weight. Celeste had been at least 40 pounds heavier than the coyote. So that's my chapter 1. Woo! This book gets me, I swear to God, this book gets me. Celeste was just a little girl, like 7 years old. Eleanor is 16. Eleanor is 16. Eleanor comes home to Tabitha. She's had a bad day at school. Tabitha wakes up and says, Tabitha says, "Why'd you open all the windows?" Tabitha asked tentatively. "Do I smell?" Oh, Tabitha's Eleanor's mom. Did I mention that? You know that, right? Okay. It was a beautiful day, and I thought I'd let some air inside. Tabitha carried her cup and saucer to the table and pulled out a vinyl chair next to Eleanor. She ran her fingers through the girl's hair and tucked her bangs behind her ear. "So what made it such a beautiful day?" she asked. Eleanor looked at the gaunt, pale face and into her mother's gray eyes. Eleanor's were usually hazel, and she wondered, not for the first time, if she could change them to match the deep, wise dusk pools her mother used to frame the world. She wanted to see as her mother did. She admired the fine web of lines around those gray eyes and the deep smile creases in her cheeks. Her lips weren't the lush things she wore when they'd met, but they were still warm and beautiful. Age and sickness had thinned them, along with the rest of her body. Eleanor kissed them. "David came back," she said. "David? You mean the Van boy? He's back in Jamesford?" "Yes. He came in during the first period." "Did he say hi?" Eleanor shook her head. Tabitha didn't press. "What does he look like?" "He's grown, of course. He has a new scar under his eyes. I think he sprained his ankle recently. He favors his left step." "Is he tall and handsome?" Eleanor blushed. "Mom, does he still have that mop of black hair?" "Oh, yes. That's how I knew it was him. Unmistakable." Tabitha sipped her tea and regarded Eleanor until she turned away to fetch something from her backpack. He might have changed, you know. You mustn't hold it against him if he has. People change every day. You might not be friends anymore. I know, Eleanor said. How's Mrs. Hart? Asked Tabitha, changing the subject. I upset her, said Eleanor. How? She called on me. She wouldn't let me alone. She went after me just when David was brought in. Tabitha looked at her with concern. What did you do? I told her that Indians were not the noble savages she made them out to be. She was going off on how American Indians were somehow saints. I shouldn't have said anything, but I did. Because David was there, Tabitha asked. No, well, maybe a little, said Eleanor. But she was wrong, just wrong. Indians were not noble shepherds or peaceful neighbors. No, they weren't, agreed Tabitha, again stroking Eleanor's hair. Eleanor leaned into her mother's hand, relishing the contact. Her hands were cold, but her fingers felt like love itself, caressing her head and neck. People change, attitudes change. Don't be prejudiced, Tabitha said. Okay, but it's flat out ignorance to say that Indians were all rain dancers and peace pipes. Still, they're your people, began Tabitha, and then stopped herself when Eleanor tensed. Tabitha dropped her head down. Tabitha dropped her hand down Eleanor's back and scratched her through her shirt. So did you get in trouble? No, she just went on talking. She probably won't call on you again for a while, huh? Offered Tabitha. I was thinking the same thing, so not all that bad. Not bad at all, Cupcake. I'm proud of you. Tabitha leaned forward and kissed her daughter on the forehead. On her mother's breath, Eleanor could smell green tea and lemon, strong and hot, mingling with a nausea pill dissolving in her stomach. The medley of odors nearly covered the wretched, underlying stink of the murdering cancer eating her away. That's Eleanor and Tabitha. They're lovely. And I was in, before at the book launch, I found myself at a pancake house that I told the story before, reading this book to try to find some good passages to read, find folks like you. And I lit upon this one. And I'm sitting in there reading this little bit to myself. And I look up, and all the pancake house, everybody in the restaurant has shut up, and they're all looking at me. I'm sitting there bawling. I'm crying on my own damn book. My picture's right there. Holding my book, crying. Anyway, I don't know if it'll make you cry, but I'm going to read it to you anyway. My Eleanor and Tabitha again in their house. Tabitha says, but I've arranged to do a little shopping after my appointment. You need new clothes. What's left in the budget? Yeah, some, provided the doctor doesn't change your pills to something ridiculous. Do we have enough for new clothes? Sure, maybe even a pair of socks. One for each of us. Eleanor kidded. Why? Do you need something? Just thinking out loud, said her mother. She placed her last card on the table. 15 for 2, and the next crib is yours. Oh. It was past 10 when they stopped playing. We got a big day tomorrow, Mom, Eleanor said. You should get to bed. I'm not sleepy, she said. I'm going to watch some TV. Keep me company. Now Eleanor knew something was wrong. Tabitha was tired, she knew it. The pills were knocking her mother out. She didn't press for answers. She felt her mother's reluctance in talking to her about it. Tabitha would tell her when she was ready, Eleanor would say. Okay, Mom, she said. So what's on? Eleanor cuddled with Tabitha on the couch. They watched an old movie with martinis, murder, and a cute dog, and long evening dresses. Eleanor felt her mother drift in and out, and then fall asleep outright before the second act. Eleanor watched until the final moment, never guessing who it was until the killer was revealed at a dinner party. The next movie was a B-horror film from the 80s about a scampering pack of puppets terrorizing a small town. Eleanor switched it off and watched the dying embers in the fireplace. In just a few minutes, she fell asleep, still wrapped in Tabitha's arms. She dreamt poorly. Old memories mixed with new fear, blades, bullets, lies. Murder in the desert, her house on fire, a knife in her side. She dreamt there was a car outside her house. People furtively got out of it and snuck up to her porch. She imagined their footsteps on the path, crunching the wind-blown snow leading to her door. Eleanor snapped awake. Her heart raced. Sleep evaporated like alcohol on a summer sidewalk. Adrenaline slowed the world. She lay still and listened. She could hear her mother's breathing, smell smoke from the dying wood fire. It's the only shadows on the wall. Carefully, she pulled herself away from Tabitha and looked toward the door. The streetlight glow was interrupted by a figure as someone crossed in front of the window outside. Russell Little, she thought. He's out there with his friends. Greg Finley drove them here. They're going to kill us, burn our house down. It's happening again. She saw a flash of light. And then the unmistakable, piquant smell of sulfur from a burning flare. Could she smell gasoline? Mama, she whispered, Mama, get up. There are people here. They're going to kill us. Mama, we have to run. Tabitha blinked her eyes. She saw the flickering red lights dancing on the curtain and asked, what time is it, Cupcake? I don't know, she said. It's late, we've got to go. Take a blanket. Crouching and silent, Eleanor hurried to the back of the house to see if it was guarded. It's midnight, her mother said, standing up, stretching and wrapping herself with a blanket, but making no move to follow Eleanor out the back door. Come on, Mama, Eleanor pleaded, her voice panicked and breaking. We have to go now. The doorbell rang. Eleanor, get the door. Mama, beseeched Eleanor. Tabitha, come now. Real terror gripped her. She could only gape at her mother as her mother just stood there waiting, expecting Eleanor to get the door. Instinct, life, survival. She took a step back into the kitchen. This was it. It was over. She would run. She would figure out what this mystery somewhere else, somewhere safe, and she would mourn, but she would live. She would miss Tabitha. She would miss David, miss it all, but she had to run. She looked again at her mother in sad, horrible farewell. Tabitha grinned. She was mad. She didn't know what was coming. How could she? Eleanor crept further away. Tabitha's grin melted into concern. Was she beginning to understand? Did she finally recognize the danger they were in? Why did she not run while she still could? Come, Mama, Eleanor said, shifting her weight for a leap. She turned to flee. She could wait no longer. Eleanor, no, her mother said. It's all right. Ready to spring, knowing she would use the window over the sink if she had to. She paused. Trust me, her mother said. The words filled her like a shot. She stumbled. The bell rang. The red, flaming lights cast bloody shadows through the drapes. She was scared. She was confused. Instinct said, run. Tabitha, her living mother, asked to trust her and stay. She froze, her body as taut as a coiled snake. Eleanor, Cupcake, her mother said, trust me and get the door. Disoriented and angry, confused by her own insane movement, Eleanor found herself easing back inside. She stepped toward her mother, who welcomed the step with a smile and a nod. Come on, child, she said, answer the door. Against everything she felt, everything she knew that was happening, against her own survival instinct, Eleanor walked to the door, as if hypnotized. At the door, she smelled hell. Outside was cordite, gunpowder, sulfur, and paper, all burning outside the house. Why was she doing this? She would die now. Die because she had trusted Tabitha instead of her instincts. For love, she would die. She was insane. She opened the door. The air erupted in fiery light and smoke. Explosions deafened her hearing. Her eyes were useless, blinded by magnesium flashes. She gasped for breath to scream, choking on chemical smoke. Before she could let loose her wail, a final sound, Wendy then stepped onto the porch. She held a piece of notepaper in her hand. Her mother held a flashlight over her shoulder, and she read the text. Fireworks are such a sight, she recited. They make the darkness all the bright. If you will, if you might, come with me to prom that night. I would be your noble knight. You would be my shining light. Eleanor's jaw fell slack as she gawked at little Wendy then. The second night has a K in it, you know, like the kind that slays dragons and such. When Eleanor didn't say anything, Wendy cocked her head to the side and said, It's David. He's inviting you to go dancing. You don't need to decide right now. Tomorrow's okay, or the next day even, but I hope you say yes. He really wants to go with you. It'll be so much fun. The sky burst into chrysanthemum blossom of blue and yellow sparks. Roman candles set on the road in front of the house shot blazing, whistling fireballs overhead. Eleanor saw David kneeling beside a tube. He touched a red road flare to a fuse and it hissed to life. A fountain of silver and gold glitter burned away the darkness. David stepped away and squinted in the light. He shaded his eyes with his hand and peered at the house. He caught sight of Eleanor in the doorway and ducked behind his mother's parked car. "Won't you come in?" offered Tabitha. "No thanks," said Mrs. Van. "We just came to deliver the message." Wendy had turned around to watch the pyrotechnics. She squealed and hopped on her toes with each burst of light. Tabitha stepped outside, and the four stood on the porch and watched the fireworks together. Neighbors wandered into the street to see the last of the show. Eleanor glanced around, expecting a lynch mob to form, but everyone just watched the lights. Eleanor caught sight of one woman pointing out to her husband. They both waved. She waved back without thinking. She knew then that David had told them what he was going to do. They expected this. They were all part of it. Tabitha too. Eleanor's head buzzed with excitement. Her knees threatened to drop her. Her hands shook like autumn aspen leaves. She was scared and confused again, and when she felt her mother's arm lovingly wrap around her, she also felt ashamed. She rubbed her cheek on the old woman's hand and looked up at her mother. Tabitha shivered under the blanket. Her cheeks were sunken, her color sallow, and made unreal in the firelight, but she grinned. It was the proudest smile Eleanor had ever seen her wear. It's scary because I know why she's afraid. Okay, I'm going to leave it a couple more minutes. Does anyone have any questions? I appreciate you listening to me. Books are children. You love them to death. And if you're writers, and if anyone asks you who your favorite writer is, if the answer isn't you, you're doing it wrong. Be your favorite writer. I write multi-genre because I like what I want to. I write what I want to read. I write what moves me. You should do that too. That way you'll have always at least one fan. Anyway, I'll be selling these. Eleanor is a standalone. The original title of this book was Tabitha, but they changed it to Eleanor, and I think they did the right thing. But the series is called The Unseen. This is a complete standalone. This is a complete done deal. It's not like you read this, you're stuck reading the whole series. But book 2, called Celeste, comes out in June. And the third book, David, comes out after that. So it is a trilogy. But this is a freaking lovely book, and it did win Gold Quill Best Young Adult from League of Utah Writers just like last week. It was freaking awesome! It's young adult, there's a little kissing, but it's a great kiss. Oh God. The best kiss ever. Anyway, does anyone have any questions for me? You have a question. Don't turn around. I'll look at you in front. All right, okay. Yes, I have been thinking of a pen name, as a matter of fact. I'm getting into some new angles, a little bit of increase my cash flow. I'm going to be writing under Thruster McLongtime, self-published. Anyway, I don't know. I love writing. I love my books. These are all wonderful. I have next year I'll have 3 books out of mystery. Takes place here in Utah. Next one, and then I highly recommend you all look for The Finger Trap next fall. I'll either make friends for life or you'll run me out on a rail on that one. So. Anyway, that's it. No questions. Just give me some love.
Do you write from the heart? Is it an objectivity? Is it, I mean, where do you come up with this?
Very good question. I always, part of my pre-writing process always begins with a theme. Always begins with a theme. I consider it like a lighthouse when I'm navigating the rest of the story. In Beatrice, it was love, the dark side of it. I've just come through watching my sister go through the ugliest divorce, and she made it as ugly as possible. But I wanted to explore the dark side of love, and that was my theme. I actually wrote it before I started, the dark side of love. With Eleanor, it was far more complicated. But Eleanor, one of the key points I wanted to investigate was trust and the ability to change but not change. the ability as a metaphor of pain and suffering and how much change and turmoil there is at this part of our lives. In a young adult book, the reason why young adult books, I think one of the reasons why they're so popular is because a young adult can have so much crisis within a short period of time. If a grown-up has a lot of trouble like this, it's called a midlife crisis and you get one, maybe two. Young adults go through so much turmoil day to day to day as they discover who they are and who their friends are. So I have a figure who ultimately can be anything she wants to be. But once she's there, she's stuck. I'm giving something away. I mentioned Skinwalker. But also, it's ridiculously painful to go through all the changes. So it became a metaphor. And then I wanted to show the powerlessness. I'm a raging feminist. And I wanted to show the powerlessness. I envisioned a very powerless person. I envisioned a young girl who has to hide, being tended by a terminally ill woman who's helping her hide. They're impoverished and troubled and just hanging on by their teeth, but they're strong because they love each other. And what happens when that is threatened? And in a way, I had my grandmother who died of the wicked disease, and I had several friends who died of the wicked disease, cancer. I always call it that. I had a wonderful woman tell me that on her deathbed. I remember I was this tall, and I went to visit her with the wicked disease. It stuck with me. And they kind of visited me and walked me through it. And as I visited with my grandmother and Tabitha, and we spent time together, it just, I was telling you earlier today that from the time I dropped my pen to this book was finished, it was 49 days. I just wrote it, and I swear half the time I was taking dictation. He edited it, but it happened on its own. But I wanted to explore the young adult problems, trust, and how to trust when you genetically or instinctively trained not to.
What kind of research did you do?
Well, for the Skinwalker, I started, of course, with Tony Hillerman's, a bit of research. For the Skinwalker, I actually started it, and then I stopped. What I found is that there's not a culture in the world that doesn't have some story, some legend, some folk tale about shapeshifters of some kind, whether they're werewolves and lycanthropes in Liechtenstein, or they're the Skinwalkers in the Navajo legends, or there's some ogres and things. Everybody's got one. So I had the idea, what if all these things are actually just witness accounts of something that nobody's ever actually understood what it is? So I envisioned a parallel predatory species that basically works through us. And that is the research I did on that. For Wyoming, it was a little more complicated. I grew up in the West, so I knew my way around there. I found every webcam in a place called Du Bois, Wyoming, which is a little pimple on the backside of Wyoming, if you've never been there. It's kind of a pimple on the backside of Wyoming. But I loved it. I loved the idea of a little town and how I could actually create a setting as one of the major characters. And Jamesford becomes a huge character in this. I had to explain this to my publishers. Why did you give me a whole chapter describing Jamesford? I said, because it's the second biggest character in the book. And for that, I did webcams, and I actually drove through Wyoming to do that. And I went and I visited, among other things, the Black Hills for the Native American experience there. And that actually just kind of shaped. The other thing is change that I wanted very much to explore in this. One of the best compliments I had is my wife said, in the last book, this character wasn't like this. And I said, do you think she changed? She said, yeah. So all these things, and Tabitha telling Eleanor not to be prejudiced is, of course, very, very, very key to the whole thing. This is called a young adult, but it is a complete Trojan horse. I got away with exploring everything from post-traumatic stress disorder to prejudice, bigotry, hatred, bullying, extramarital affairs. All kinds of stuff happens in this, but in the guise of this. And the reason you can do that